exact moment he walked up, but generally I was looking over some notes or thinking about the extent to which women could succeed in areas of violent crime in law enforcement. There had been some rumblings in Santa Monica where I lived about a particular woman officer who was incapable of performing some acts, and I was writing or thinking about that.
So you expressed to him your interest in writing about women who are employed as police officers.
Yes.
And he indicated to you that he had some strong feelings about that subject?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What did he respond?
It was around that time that he told me he was an officer and had strong feelings about whether or not women should be on the Los Angeles Police Department and working specifically in areas of high crime.
Did he tell you anything about any organization he was active in with respect to that issue?
Yes, he mentioned Men Against Women, which is actually policemen against police women, commonly called MAO.
Now, as a result of this conversation, did you agree to have further conversations with Officer Furman?
Yes.
How did that come about?
After he told me about this particular group, Men Against Women, it stirred a curiosity, and I was very interested in finding out why a group like that would be formed, what kind of frustrations some men working on the police department would have that would cause them to want to join a group like that, and what kinds of things they would do to stonewall or embarrass or humiliate women, and also what kind of effect that had on women, how they would feel. So I thought that that particular issue was something that I really would like to explore, and I would very much like to have his point of view as to why some men felt very strongly that some women were incapable of working in areas of high crime.
Now, is this a frequent or common arrangement when someone is doing a screenplay or preparing a treatment for a screenplay to consult with someone with first-hand experience?
Objection, I assume staff's not going to.
Oral. Do you understand the question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I work that way. I don't know how frequently all writers do. I would think frequently. You really need, if you're going to write about a particular issue and you want to be able to obtain different points of view, then you need to talk with people who have that kind of experience, and you also need to be able to understand procedural issues in many different facets. So it's a very common practice for me. I do extensive interviews and with people, and I shadow them with their permission at work just to see what kinds of obstacles they have during the day, who their friends are, what their conversations are. So it's a common practice with me.
All right. And was Mark Furman the only person you were meeting with or consulting in the course of preparing this treatment?
Leading is the time.
Sustained.
At the same time, well, let's start with
Right.
Officer Furman.
I'm still at the cafe in Westwood.
Okay. Did you agree at the cafe in Westwood that you would continue to meet with Officer Furman for the purpose of getting this background information that you wanted?
Yes.
How soon after your initial meeting did you first sit down and talk with him in an interview format?
In early April.
Now this interview, where did that take place?
We usually met at Alice's restaurant in Westwood. I believe it's on Westwood Boulevard.
And again, briefly describe your purpose in having this meeting in April at Alice's restaurant?
I needed to hear his ideas, his thoughts, his feelings about some elements of police work.
Did you tape record that interview?
Yes, that initial interview, a taped interview in April, was taped. I believe that was April 2nd.
Okay. Now, this, I take it, was the first of a series of interview meetings. Is that correct?
Yes.
About how many times did you sit down and conduct an interview of this nature with Officer Furman?
Approximately 12 to 15 times.
And were all of these interviews tape recorded?
No.
How many of them were tape recorded?
12 to 14. One in particular I remember that was not tape recorded was one in 1993 with then, I believe, Detective Furman, a gentleman who had optioned the property, and another woman officer that had been who had been a partner with Detective Furman.
Okay. But your general practice was to tape record the meetings between yourself and Officer Furman.
Yes.
And what was your purpose in tape recording them?
I knew that it seemed to me that he would be giving me a lot of information that would be hard for me to process because it's new. And I needed to hear his words for dialogue purposes to be able to construct accurate characters so that they would be clear. And I needed to, if it was a police procedural issue, I would need to listen to it again and be able to visualize it, to be able to cinematically write it. And I didn't feel that I would be able to take copious notes on a yellow pad that would enable me to listen actively, ask questions, participate, take the notes, and then be able to clearly, cinematically write it.
And was Officer Furman aware that you were tape recording the conversations?
Yes.
You just put the tape recorder on the table,
Yes.
turned it on?
I turned it on.
Were there times when you would turn the recorder off?
Yes.
Describe those times.
I didn't automatically turn the recorder on when we would first begin the interview. I would turn it on when I felt that he was ready to discuss perhaps some of the questions that I had given him ahead of time, or he just seemed that it was the appropriate time to start taping.
And were there occasional interruptions with people serving food or things of that nature?
Yes, there were interruptions.
And you would not record those interruptions?
Sometimes I would turn it off if I could see it would be a lengthy interruption.
Now, after you concluded the interview, what would you do with the tape?
I would put the tape in my transcribing machine at home in front of my computer and transcribe the tape. My transcribing machine accommodates transcriptions because it modulates the speed of the tape so that you can slow it down or speed it up to be able to hear more clearly. It also has an audible, it modulates the volume, and has a foot pedal to allow you to stop and start and rewind appropriately.
So this is professional transcribing equipment that you use?
Yes.
Did you have some experience in operating that equipment and transcribing tapes?
Yes, I was a professional transcriber in college.
And how long did you do that?
2 to 3 years. I worked for a retail credit company.
And your job at Retail Credit Company was actually transcribing taped interviews?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What were your duties at Retail Credit?
My job was to transcribe reports that inspectors would give regarding people they were investigating.
Now, were the transcriptions verbatim transcriptions of what was on the tape?
My transcriptions were of what Officer Furman would say, what I would hear him to say, and what I would say.
Right. So what you put into the transcript were his words.
Yes.
Did you edit his words at all in the process of transcribing the tapes?
No.
And in fact, did you on at least one occasion tell Officer Furman that the transcripts you were preparing were verbatim transcripts of what he was saying?
Yes.
Now, in these transcripts, was the, or in the interviews that were taped, was the word nigger ever used?
Yes.
Now, if that word appears in a transcript of the interview, is it because that word was spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes.
You never added that word to any of the transcription that you were preparing on any occasion when he didn't say the word, did you?
No.
After you transcribed the tapes, what did you do with the actual tapes?
I put them in a filing cabinet that's designed for tape storage.
And you preserved them?
Yes.
Now, have all of the tapes of all of your interviews with Officer Furman been preserved?
No.
Could you explain what happened with respect to any tapes that are no longer still in existence?
Yes. I inadvertently recorded another interview over one tape and a similar situation with another tape.
So when you taped over, it erased what was originally on the tape.
Yes.
Do you recall which interviews that happened to?
Our first interview, taped interview, and I believe it's numbered the 9th now.
Okay. Now, the first interview is the one you've already referred to on April 2nd, 1985,
Yes.
at Alice's Restaurant.
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when the 9th interview was?
I'd have to look at it to be able to tell you.
We'll come back to that. Now, at the time you were preparing what is called a treatment for a screenplay, is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you explain the difference between a treatment and an actual screenplay?
A treatment is a narrative form of the story. It's in prose and in paragraph form. It delineates the principal characters, the protagonist, the antagonist, some of the secondary characters, the main problem in the story, what the obstacles are, possibly some dialogue, what the resolution might be.
And the screenplay that you were contemplating was to be a fictional story, was it not?
It was to be a fictional story based on reality.
Did you ever explain to Officer Furman the role he would play in terms of your process of creating this story?
Yes.
And what, could you explain to us what that role was to be?
To help give me some ideas from the point of view of some men who might belong to this particular group, Men Against Women, and how men would be frustrated by some of the actions of some women, and what kinds of things they would do to possibly stonewall women or make it uncomfortable for them, how they might react where they partnered with women, how they reacted to the administration, how partners' relationships, procedural issues.
So you wanted him to recount for you his own personal experience?
Objection, that's legal.
Sustained.
Did you communicate to him in any way an expectation as to the nature of the information he was to convey to you?
The nature of the information that I wish that he would convey would be something that would help me develop a story wherein a very competent woman officer is transferred into a precinct where there's high crime, and she is forced to work with an officer who is a member of this particular group, Men Against Women. That was the structure or the characters that I really wanted to work with, and so the information that I needed from him was what would a working relationship be like? What would some of the frustrations be having to work with a woman officer? What would be some of her frustrations? And then possibly what could be some situations that might occur in a precinct such as this. It was structured after the 77th precinct.
Now, was there any difference between the nature of the first interview and the subsequent interviews of Officer Furman?
That's vague, Your Honor.
Overruled. Do you understand the question?
Could you repeat it, please?
Was there any difference in the nature of the first interview that you conducted with Officer Furman and then the later interviews as the project developed?
Yes. In the first interviews, I really needed to hear what he had to say without directing him specifically, and be able to hear his words, his dialogue, the kinds of issues that he felt comfortable expressing to me. And in the later transcripts reflect that many of the points that we talk about are related to the story. I give general categories, and he responds. And the later interviews, I believe some of them are transcribed in terms of categories. It's not question and answer. It's more of a specified topical interview. And it also, my transcriptions during some of the interviews, the later interviews, were reflecting my lack of time. I had just had one child and was having another child and was working a couple of jobs and writing, and those things. So I had less time, and I really just needed to have him answer certain questions. So there's a difference in the transcriptions.
So the later interviews were much more directed to specific areas as opposed to getting background information?
Objection, cross
Overruled.
Counsel Levy.
Overruled.
Yes.
Now, how quickly after the interviews took place did you prepare the transcript?
Within a day or two, I transcribed them.
So your transcriptions were done right after the interviews had taken place while they were still fresh in your mind?
Yes.
Sustained, answer stricken.
Why did you do the transcription within a day or two after the interview?
I was very interested in the project, and again, I had more time initially. I could work later hours. I could work early in the morning. My time was more fluid. But I really wanted to be able to transcribe them and hear the dialogue. It's easier to transcribe something, especially when there's interruptions. It's easier to transcribe it when you're closer to the topic.
And after you prepared a transcription of the interview, did you deliver a copy of that transcription to Officer Furman?
I believe the first transcript I sent to him, along with some questions that I wanted to pursue in the following taped interview. At some point after most of our interviews during 1985, I gave him the collection of transcripts. I don't remember if I sent him each transcript. I remember the first one I did.
Okay, so you recall specifically that after the first interview, you sent him a copy of the transcript with a set of questions.
Right.
Overruled.
Was that in anticipation then of your second interview?
Yes, I had given him a series of questions to think about and see if he would like to answer those in preparation for our next interview.
And then at the conclusion or at a point where you had conducted a number of interviews, you gave him a bound set of the transcripts?
Yes.
Sustained. She didn't say anything about bound transcripts.
Okay, do you recall the form in which you gave him a set of transcripts?
I recall giving him at some point after our initial 85 interviews that collection of transcriptions.
And in what form
I had
did you
given
give
it
them to
to him in a 3-ring binder similar to the way that I had bound mine.
All right. Your Honor, we have a 3-page document. A copy has been supplied to the people, headed Furman Questions Round 2. We would ask these 3 pages be
All right, 1364.
1364 for identification. May I approach?
You may.
Ms. McKinney, I'm handing you a 3-page document with numbered items from 1 through 31, and it's headed Furman. Could you look at that?
Yes.
You recognize that?
Yes.
What is that?
These are the questions that I sent to Officer Furman after our first interview so that he could perhaps refresh his mind on what we had discussed, and then he would know what kinds of issues I would like to discuss the next time we met.
So you are actually giving him questions in advance of the interview, so for what purpose?
Well, time was limited. He was a very busy man, and I wanted him to understand what issues I really needed to talk about.
And did this list of questions contain specific references to the transcript that accompanied them?
Not every question. A few of the questions have references to page numbers of my original transcript.
Well, for example, item 15 on your list of questions, does that refer to a specific page of the transcript that you're asking him to look at?
Yes, item 15.
Okay. Item 16, is that a question that you asked him in the follow-up interview?
Yes.
And that question was, how do you hire someone who is capable of shooting someone in the back, number 1, and number 2, on what grounds would you determine who is capable of figuring out who the bad guys are?
Yes, that's number
Now,
16.
was that question drawn from a specific reference in the transcript?
According to this and my notes, that was referring to page 25 of the first taped interview.
Are there other references in those questions to the transcript, either by quoting material in the transcript or referring to specific pages?
Yes, generally when there's parentheses around a word, that indicates that it's something that we possibly discussed. For instance, number 27, why is the chokehold considered brutality? That would be something that we had discussed.
Now, at any time in the course of your interviews, did Officer Furman ever indicate that there were any inaccuracies in the transcript?
No.
Now, at the same time that you were conducting these interviews with Officer Furman, were you meeting with other persons associated with the Los Angeles Police Department?
Yes, I was during that period. I met with approximately 15 to 20 other officers from Los Angeles Police Department, either through the Parker Center on ride-alongs or some of the PTs at the Los Angeles Police Academy, along with around 20 to 25 police cadets there at the Los Angeles Police Academy, women cadets.
And did you also tape record those meetings and interviews?
Many of them were tape recorded. Some of the meetings and discussions with the cadet women were when I was there with them when they were in training and running and wrestling, watching them do that and observing their pre-training prior to entering Los Angeles Police Academy. So many of those were very informal and they weren't taped, but several of them were.
Now, were all of the interviews you conducted with Officer Furman just yourself and Officer Furman, or did you ever involve any third persons in the process?
No, there are several interviews where there is another party involved.
And for what purpose was that done?
Sometimes it's to give me additional information that it's hard to be able to acquire when you're conducting the interview, because it's a one-on-one and you're looking at someone and trying to respond appropriately. You're not observing. So that was helpful information. One particular interview was a woman who was going to pretend to be a woman who wanted to enter the police academy, and Officer Furman was going to talk with her about his feelings about that. Another interview was with a gentleman with whom I was working at UCLA, an athlete, who was going to talk with Officer Furman. Another was with a gentleman who had optioned the piece, and it was more of a partial story conference.
Now, did these interviews with the woman who was portraying someone interested in going into LAPD and with the gentleman who was a student of yours at UCLA, did you say?
Yes, he was one of the students with whom I worked.
Perhaps you could identify these individuals. Who were these persons who played these roles?
By name?
Yes.
You wish like? The woman was Lori Diaz. She was a personal friend who agreed to do this confidentially. And the gentleman was James Washington. And the producer was John Flynn.
And were these interviews tape recorded as well?
Yes, they were.
And did the interviews with Lori Diaz and James Washington also take place in 1985?
Yes.
Did you find any of the comments that Officer Furman was making in the course of your interviews offensive?
Objection about that.
I heard your question. I didn't hear what happened with the court after that.
I
I'm
believe
sorry.
you
You can answer the question.
Okay. Yes.
Did you ever confront him or question him about the statements he was making?
Generally, no.
Why not?
I had a journalistic approach to this project with all the people that I interviewed. And for me, that means that when I'm trying to hear someone's point of view, even though I might not espouse their feelings, whether they're a man or a woman, I don't react in a way that will cause them to drop their feeling of confidentiality their desire to communicate their ideas with me, so I don't respond in a way that will cause them to stop talking to me.
Your Honor, at this point, we would like to take Ms. McKinney through each of the items in our offer of proof to have her authenticate the context of the conversation, that in the case of the transcriptions, it is an accurate record of what Officer Furman said, and where we do have a tape recording to authenticate his voice.
Proceed.
We do have a video that was prepared in advance which would display the text, and where we have the voice, play the voice accompanying the text. With the court's permission, I'd like to utilize that in the examination.
Proceed. I take it have you given a copy of this to the prosecution?
Yes.
All right. Proceed.
Uh,
We'll mark the tape, the videotape, as Defense Exhibit 1365.
Perhaps it would help if Ms. McKinney were able to look at a copy of our offer of proof at the same time that we're displaying the text.
Perhaps it would save some time. I don't think that there's going to be any question about the authenticity of the tapes. The tapes speak for themselves. The only question is the transcripts where there are no tapes. And I think that having Ms. McKinney go through tapes which do speak for themselves is just going to spend a lot of time proving the obvious. We could probably save a lot of time by cutting to the chase and going through the transcripts that are on the tapes.
Well, there does have to be some foundation that she recognizes the voices and who's there, though. Some basic foundation.
I think one of the issues...
Stipulate that she would identify her voice and that of Mark Furman on the tapes.
I think one of the issues Your Honor has to address is how much consumption of time will be involved in presenting this to the jury. I think we can very expeditiously kind of give you a preview of precisely how this material would be presented to the jury so that Your Honor is in a better position to rule.
All right, well, let's at least start with the non-transcribed matters.
There's the additional issue of whether she has an independent recollection apart from the tapes, and that would have to be established.
Well, I'm sure that'll be on cross-examination gone into.
Well, the problem is, foundationally speaking, Your Honor, that the tapes should not be played until that area is explored, because then you get into a leading situation.
No.
I intend to elicit, as we go through each excerpt, her memory of Detective Furman speaking those words.
Proceed.
If I can approach.
Yes.
I'm handing you, Ms. McKinney, a copy of the offer of proof that was prepared for the court, containing excerpts from the transcripts and the tapes that were supplied pursuant to subpoena to the court.
All right, and which page are you referring to?
We'll
the
begin on
offer of
page 9.
It's the amended offer. Proof, Your Honor.
For the record.
It's the amended offer,
Yes,
not the initial list.
yes, the amended offer of proof. All right, if we could begin
Wait,
with...
wait. Did you change the numbers in the amended offer of proof?
No. I'll be referring to these excerpts in terms of the three categories we established, Your Honor. B being racial animosity and the use of racial epithets, which will include items B1 through B40, and actually we added one more, B41, in a supplement to the offer of proof. And then
Let me ask you, just as out of sheer curiosity, do you actually anticipate that any court would allow you to have all 41 of these incidents? Isn't there some cumulative problem here? a redundancy?
Well, I certainly plan to address the question of the cumulative issue in the argument. If you'd like, I'll address it now.
Well, I'm just asking, do you think in presenting this issue to the court, do you think I really need to contemplate all 41 of these? Aren't there perhaps a half dozen of these that capture the essence of what you want to present?
Well, we believe there are 17 to be exact that will be admissible for two purposes, not only to show the use of the word, but to show actual racial bias and hostility. And
All right,
certainly,
then why do I have to listen to 41? So you've conceded at this point that the remainder is
well, certainly,
surplusage.
I think we're entitled to elicit that there were 41. But in terms of the ones that would actually be displayed or heard, it's not unreasonable to suggest that the actual display or hearing of the epithets would be limited to the ones that have relevance beyond simply the use of the word nigger. I'm certainly not going to argue that there's any evidentiary significance to hearing just that word 41 times, but we believe the context in which the word is used in many of these examples goes beyond simply the use of a racial epithet.
Then wouldn't it be a more efficient use of my time, your time, and the jury's time if you limit yourself to the 17 that you think are the ones that are appropriately offered to the court?
I think we're kind of jumping the gun at this point to start talking about editing it in terms of the offer of proof. What we would like to do, and we can go through it very quickly. I mean, these will not take much time at all, and we've edited them down to the bare bones so that in each case it's just the couple of sentences surrounding the use of the word, and Ms. McKinney can put it in context. And it won't take much time at all. And then at that point, the court will be in a position to say, well, now we need to talk about what the jury should actually hear.
You're offering me 41, but you really only want 17.
No, we want 41. I mean, I think that the counter argument obviously is going to be, well, you know, this was inadvertent. He didn't remember speaking these words 7 or 8 years ago in the context of a screenplay interview.
Play your tape.
Okay. Could we start with number 1, please?
Number 1.
Number 1 is from transcript number 1. There's no sound.
All right, that was number 1.
That was number 1. Do you recall Officer Furman speaking these words?
Yes,
And when and where were they spoken?
and they were spoken on April 2nd in the first taped interview.
All right. And this is the interview that the tape was inadvertently taped over. Is that correct?
Yes,
And are these words that we've got females and dumb niggers and all your Mexicans that can't even write the name of the car they drive, is that an accurate record of Officer Furman's actual words?
yes,
And this transcription was made while those words were fresh in your memory.
Objection, that's leading.
Sustained.
That's
Stricken.
foundational, Your Honor.
It's leading, counsel, and it's the issue that's before the court, wouldn't you say?
Right. Did you prepare this transcription of these words immediately after you heard them?
That's also the,
Sustained.
How soon after you heard these words did you prepare this transcript?
I prepared this transcript within a day or two of the interview.
And as you look at these words now, are they an accurate reflection of what was on the tape?
Yes,
And they accurately record what Officer Furman said to you on April 2nd?
yes.
exception of foundation.
Overruled.
All right, if we could have the second excerpt. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes,
And when and where were they spoken?
they were spoken during the first taped interview in early April.
And again, that was recorded how soon after the words were spoken?
Within a day or two, that would have been recorded at the same time.
transcription.
That would have been transcribed at the same time the previous
Now, in this
excerpt
excerpt, there is a blank. It says, "If I'm wrestling with some blank nigger." Is the blank something that you put into the transcript?
Yes,
And why would you do that?
it would have been a word that was inaudible, but I just wouldn't type out inaudible. That would let me know that it was something that I didn't understand.
All right? So you would, if there were inaudible words that you could not record verbatim, you would indicate by inserting a blank into the transcript?
Yes,
If we could have the third excerpt, please. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
yes.
And when and where were they spoken?
During the first taped interview
On April 2nd?
on April 2nd.
And does the transcript accurately record what was said by Officer Furman at that time?
Yes,
And how soon after did you make the transcription of this comment?
within a day or two of the interview.
All right?
Excuse me, Ms. McKinney, with
Sir.
regards to this April 2nd interview, you transcribed the entire tape within a day or two
Of the interview.
of the interview?
Yes.
All right.
In one sitting, I transcribed the entire interview.
All right.
Number 4, please. Do you recognize those words as being spoken by Officer Furman?
Aside from Fatburger, yes.
All right. You don't recall a specific reference to Fatburger?
I do reading it, but I don't have a recollection unless I read it.
Do you recall the context in which these words were spoken?
We were talking about the way some
That's not responsible.
Overruled.
we
You
were
can answer the question.
we were talking about the way some suspects may be arrested, and I'm not familiar with 22nd and Western, so it didn't set up a visual picture for me where
Now-
Fatburger was.
At the time of these interviews, Officer Furman was a patrol officer in Westwood, is that correct?
Yes.
In this excerpt, was he describing an event that actually took place while he was working as a patrol officer in Westwood?
Objection, no foundation.
Sustain. Foundation.
Could you explain how it came about that he described this incident to you?
Objection, ask the answer.
Well,
I need to see my original transcript to be able to read what comes before.
All right.
And I'll object to that procedure, Your Honor.
on what basis? Overruled.
Well, may I?
You may.
I have here, Ms. McKinney, a set of the transcripts that have been prepared, including
She's indicated she hasn't really clear recollection.
She's indicated that she needs to refresh her recollection from her original transcript, is what she's indicated.
does the binder I've just handed you contain your transcription of the first interview on April 2nd?
Yes.
If you could refer to page 33 of that interview. Does that page contain the Fat Burger excerpt?
Yes.
Putting that in context, can you tell us whether this was an explanation or a description of an actual event?
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Speculation.
You can answer the question.
Could you ask the question again, please? I was reading.
Is the excerpt a description of an actual event?
For conclusion.
Overruled.
This is a description of an actual event that took place, according to Officer Furman, on the previous night.
So he was telling you what had happened the night before. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
That's correct.
If we could have the next excerpt, please, number 5. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes.
Can you put them in context for us? What were you speaking about at the time?
We were talking about the administration of LAPD, and some of the other administration officers.
So the reference to Commander Hickman, is that a reference to an actual person?
Yes, it is.
And approximately when and where was this statement made?
This was made during the first taped interview on April 2nd.
And is the transcript an accurate record of what Officer Furman said at that time?
Yes.
And it was made how soon after the conversation took place?
Within a day or two of the taped interview.
We could proceed to number 6. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes.
And when and where were they spoken?
They were spoken during the first taped interview, April 2nd.
Why don't we just assume all of these are during the first interview until we get to...
Fine, Your Honor, I'll proceed on that assumption. What were you talking about at the time? In what context did this reference to Ethiopia come up?
I need to refer. It was a tangent. It wasn't specific to the story. But we had been talking about the media and the media's role in projecting a positive work capacity for women.
And this was an event that was in the news at the time?
Sustained.
Was there some topical nature of this reference to Ethiopia?
I don't know.
If we could have the next excerpt. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes.
And the transcript that we just presented is an accurate record of what he said?
Yes.
What were we talking about, or what were you talking about at that time in the context of discussing people in some place don't want niggers in their town?
We were discussing where Officer Furman grew up in Washington.
In the state of Washington?
Yes.
So here he was recounting his own experience of growing up, is that correct?
Objection, call for conclusion.
Sustained.
Could you tell us whether what Officer Furman was describing was based on reality?
Objection.
Sustained.
In what context was this statement made in terms of whether it reflected actual events or whether it was fictional?
Overruled. Overruled. What context was this comment made in?
He was talking about where he grew up. I grew up in Washington. I mean,
When the record reflect the witness, the reading the transcript, responded,
Yes, actually, why don't you take that back, because she only asked to refresh her recollection as to that one item. The issue here is testing her recollection. That's one of the issues here, since there's no tape recording.
Well, do
Why
you
don't you just close
recall?
that and put it up on the...
Do you presently recall in the first conversation talking with Officer Furman about his personal background and where he grew up?
reading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I recall talking with him about this particular issue where he grew up.
We could have the next excerpt, please. You recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes.
And is the transcript we just presented an accurate record of what Officer Furman said in that first interview on April 2nd?
Yes.
And in what context were these words spoken?
We were discussing the difference between PT officers, physical training officers at the academy when Officer Furman trained as opposed to PT officers at the academy at that particular time in 1985.
All right? Do you have the next excerpt? Do you recall Officer Furman speaking those words?
Yes,
And were these spoken in the first interview on April 2nd?
yes,
Is the transcript an accurate reflection of what Officer Furman said?
yes.
And in what context was this statement made?
He was explaining the use of the chokehold and the reason for eliminating it.
All right. Your Honor, that concludes the excerpts from the transcript number 1, which was the first interview. We can now proceed to interviews where we do have audio tape available.
All right,
We could
proceed.
have the next excerpt, please.
Now, people have often stipulated the authenticity, and the tapes speak for themselves.
Mr. Uelmen?
Well, Your Honor, we need to make the same showing in terms of the context in which these words were spoken.
Your Honor, obviously, the court has the entire transcript to the extent that there is context available. The court already has it, and the tapes speak for themselves. We have the entire tape for these. There's no need for this.
All right. Mr. Uelmen, though, I think he does need to establish at least some basic foundation as to the voices. Proceed.
Policemen also use Bubba a lot, because it's a slang term, because niggers, they call each other Bubba. Sometimes you go, hey Bubba, what's happening, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that kind of conversation, and somebody will say,
Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes,
And you recognize his voice?
yes,
This is an actual tape recording of an interview you conducted?
yes.
And when and where did this conversation take place?
This was in April.
So, you know, the man part, what did you witness reading that you had?
She has the offer
The
of proof.
offer of proof.
You objecting to that?
Yes,
All right, would you put that down, Ms. McKinney? Turn it over.
And when and where did this conversation take place?
This took place sometime in April
Of
of
1985.
1985.
All right. And do you recall the context in which those words were spoken?
Yes. We were talking about nicknames that officers or partners give to each other.
Thank you. Do we have the next?
Excuse me just a second. Ms. McKinney, in your transcript, you have down Baba, B-A-B-A. What I heard was Bubba. Do you distinguish between those two terms?
Is there a difference between those two terms?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Which is accurate, your transcript or the transcript that we just saw here?
B-U-B-B-A.
Bubba?
Yes.
All right, so your transcript, original transcript, is not accurate as to the specific term.
No, it's a misspelling.
Do we have the next excerpt?
People have often stipulated that.
All right, Ms. McKinney, have you listened to all these other tapes? All the other tapes that you've given to the lawyers in this case?
I listened to them when I transcribed them, yes.
All right. Mr. Uelmen?
Could we proceed?
No, if she's saying that these are all Mr. Furman on the tapes, I don't need to hear anymore. I've read the offer of proof, I've heard the tapes, I've read the transcripts.
There are issues that come up, Your Honor, in terms of the context of each of these statements. The people, for example, in their brief, have argued that some of these involved the fictional role-playing in which Detective Furman or Officer Furman at the time was entering into some sort of a fictional context at the time he spoke. Of course, our contention is that he still used the word, and when he testified, he didn't make an exception for fictional role-playing, so that's simply a question for the jury. but as a foundational matter, we believe that with just a couple of exceptions, we can show that each of these uses of the word were in the context of conversation in which he was recounting actual experiences or giving his personal opinions, and did not involve creating dialogue or role-playing with respect to fictional characters. So
All right.
we'd like to proceed to show the context of each of the statements.
Well, let me ask you this then. Then why was it necessary for me to take all these tapes home with the offer of proof, with the transcripts, and read all this stuff and listen to all this stuff?
Well, so Your Honor could put this all into context. I mean,
Okay.
we are dealing with a very
I've heard it.
selective
I've read it.
editing.
I've seen it. All right?
Could I have a moment? We're in a position, Your Honor, where, not knowing how Your Honor is going to rule on any of these offers, we believe we're entitled to make a record to show the admissibility
record.
and the
You
and
have
the
a
relevance.
written offer of proof. You have these tape recordings. You've lodged the transcripts with the court. You have a record. What more do we need to do?
Well, I think Your Honor needs to have a sense of how this is going to be presented to the jury as well. I mean, our position is what we have done with a massive amount of material is to refine it, to edit it, to put it into a format where it can be very concisely and with great precision presented to the jury, just cut to the bare bones of what is relevant without any embellishment. And I think that's a very relevant factor for Your Honor to recognize in terms of considering what you're going to admit and allow the jury to hear. And I think it would be very helpful to Your Honor to see just how and in what format and in what context we intend to present this material to the jury.
But this video was submitted to the court yesterday afternoon, correct?
Yes,
All right. As part of the offer of proof.
that's correct.
All right. So I've seen it.
But Your Honor has not heard any testimony as to the context in which each of these statements were made.
But don't I have the transcript for that purpose?
Well, the transcript, they're saying, they're objecting to her even looking at the transcript in terms of her own memory of the context in which these statements were made and the conversations took place. We believe we have a right to present the testimony of the witness who will actually testify before the jury to establish the context of each of these statements, to show that in fact these are the opinions, these are the personal experiences of Officer Mark Furman. These are not fiction, these are not the creations of a playwright. These are the words that he was speaking in terms of his own life experience.
All right. Proceed. Her comments on the context.
All right, I will limit.
Understanding, I've read it, I've listened to it.
I'll limit my questions as we go through each excerpt to simply having her put them in context.
All right.
Your Honor, why do we need witnesses' memory, as dim as it may be 10 years later, for context, when you have the entire taped conversation for context?
Well, we don't have the entire tape conversations. There are a lot of stops and starts here. It starts in the middle of conversations. It ends in the middle of conversations. I don't know what the predicate was to all of these things. There are a lot of unanswered questions with these tapes.
And we're assuming that this witness can now remember this?
That's a judgment call, isn't it? Proceed.
Do we have
Thank
the
you.
next excerpt?
I think we're on. Hold on. We're on number 12, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
number 12.
And it's going to be necessary to play all of the tapes to give her testimony to each of the context, as opposed to letting her look at the transcript that you've got in front
No,
of her?
the tape and the spoken word is the best evidence at this point. All right, Mr. Harrison, just rewind that shortly, please.
Number 12?
I want you to search them.
How are you talk?
There. Stop them.
Yes.
See who they are.
Okay. Do you have any problem calling this one
Yeah,
down?
here's probable cause. You got it.
Okay.
You want to know who they are?
Can you tell us the context in which those words were spoken?
Yes, this is related to the story. I would be helpful to look at the transcript, but to my best recollection, I was asking how an officer would approach a suspect and stop a suspect. And these two suspects, or the suspect, I believe they are black Muslims.
All right. Do we have the next excerpt?
Black Muslims would kill a lot of policemen.
Why do they live in that area?
And do you recall the context in which those words were spoken?
It's a similar context as the last.
Was this immediately after the previous excerpt about stopping?
I don't know. I would have to see the transcript.
Would it help if you looked at the transcript in terms of?
Yes, because there are two times where a suspect is stopped, one in a car, and I asked for that information, how an officer would stop what they consider to be a suspicious car, what kind of issues would come up in that, and then there's another time where an officer is stopping two suspects on a street. So there are two different times.
All right. Would it refresh your memory to look at the transcript?
Yes.
Could you look at the transcript for tape number 1 at page 28?
Go ahead.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And in what context were those words spoken?
This would be the context regarding the black Muslims stopping two suspects on the street who are black Muslims.
In terms of where that would be likely to take place?
Yes.
We could have number 14, please.
Standing on top of a bunch of bodies going, I mean, that's just the way you feel. You know, you got 200 niggers that are trying to take your prisoner, you just chase this guy and you beat the shit out of him.
Do you recall the context in which those words were spoken?
I remember it being said. I don't remember the context.
Would it refresh your memory to look at the transcript?
Yes.
All right, could you look at transcript number 2 on or transcript of tape number 1, page 1. Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And in what context were those words spoken?
Officer Furman is explaining what it feels like to work on this particular mid-watch.
All right. Could we have number 15, please?
I don't give a fuck if she is a female. She's a policeman in the city. And don't you ever fight or fuck around with the policeman. You do what you're told. You understand, Digger?
Do you recall the context in which those words were spoken?
Yes.
And what was that?
My best recollection is it was a situation where I was asking how an officer would respond to transporting a suspect who had beaten up or hit a woman officer.
All right. Number 16.
I'm going to impose an objection again. I do not, well, I don't know, let me inquire of the court. Is this at all helpful to the court in giving it any additional information over and above what it already has in the defense proffers?
No, this is the person who's conducting the conversations and interviews of Detective Furman. She has unique personal knowledge as to each one of these individual situations.
What unique personal knowledge has she imparted thus far that we haven't already gotten more of in the proffers themselves and the actual transcripts?
Well, at some point in time, I'm going to ask that question, but I'm letting Mr. Uelmen go with what he feels is appropriate at this point.
There are a number of excerpts we'll get to in a moment where there were others present, and an additional set of excerpts where we do not have a tape, Your Honor. So I think this will be very helpful. Could we have the next excerpt?
Nigger with a knife. Go on guard.
Recall those words?
They were, I need to
I
see
think
them
we-
again. They were,
All right. Could we repeat that?
I heard it.
Just go out there. What are you going to do with some nigger with a knife? Go on guard? That's bullshit.
Do you recall the context in which those words were spoken?
I believe, yes, we were discussing fencing. It would be helpful to look at the transcript, but to my best recollection, we were discussing what it would be like to be fencing to officers, and Officer Furman was saying that something to the effect that even knowing fencing isn't particularly useful because that's not something that an officer would be called upon to use in the line of duty.
So when you refer to fencing, you're referring to sword fights?
Yes.
All right. Could we have the next
All right,
excerpt?
hold on. Madam Reporter, all right, we need to take a recess. All right, we're going to take a 15-minute recess at this time, and Ms. McKinney, you may step down, come back in 15 minutes, all right? Thank you.
Please clear the courtroom.
Epithets that the defense is seeking to offer before the jury, and I'll have Mrs. Robertson file this as an addenda to the defense offer of proof.
Your Honor,
Excuse
what
me,
this
counsel.
list-
Excuse me.
Yes. I'm sorry.
All right, we'll addend this to the amended offer of proof. Previously, the court had ordered the offers of proof and the response sealed. because of the inflammatory nature of the content. And I have decided that given the fact that we are now publicly discussing the content, that I'm going to unseal the proffer and the prosecution response, and I'll instruct my staff to make that available over the noon hour. Secondly, Mr. Uelmen, over the recess I had the opportunity to sit and contemplate for a few moments, and I agree with the prosecution that the court does have, I think, ample context, having read the entire transcript with regards to each of the identified excerpts that you wish to play. However, I think that there is a overriding public interest in the nature of the offer that you're making. And I don't want this court to ever be in a position where there is any indication that this court would participate in suppressing information that is of vital public interest. I think that's already been expressed by the city attorney's office, and it's been expressed by other interested entities that this information be made public. So what I'm going to suggest we do at this point, Mr. Uelmen, is that you play your video presentation to the court in its entirety without further interruption. I'll hear it again, and that'll be for the purpose of public dissemination of this information. But I have read and considered and listened to all of this.
Your Honor, if we could just make one request. There are some excerpts where, for example, it refers to Officer Furman nodding without describing the nature of the nod. It refers to a ripping motion in the course of the discussion of what you would do with a driver's license, which does not appear in the transcript. We would, with respect to those excerpts, request to stop the tape and just put a few questions to...
Well, let me ask you about number 15. Miss Detective Furman is heard to make some noises at the end of the tape, which in my, I guess, screenwriter's imagination thought he was discussing, this is where the context was, how would a police officer respond to transporting a suspect who's been arrested for assaulting a police officer? And Furman says, well, you would tell them you don't do that to anybody, any police officer, be they male or female, and then he makes some noises, which, given the context of the other tapes, I interpreted as either baton shots or something like that, gestures similar to that, which are not recorded. So if that's the context of the gestures that are being made, I don't know. So I agree with you, there may be some portions where you need to stop. But other than that, I think I understand the context.
All right.
Are we clear?
Well, could we back up then to 17? Yes. We have a problem with our court reporter.
No, we don't have a problem
We don't
with
have
our
a
court
problem. We
reporter.
have a problem with us. The transcript simply reflects silence while the displayed portion of the excerpt is displayed, and then questions about that excerpt. If we could have a stipulation that at that point we could insert into the record the actual words of that were being displayed at the time.
Well, we are referring to by excerpt keyed to the offer of proof. The offer of proof also has the text, so the text is there. The record, I think, is adequate.
All right. And I also wanted to clarify that the list I gave, Your Honor, of the 17 instances are instances that we contend are relevant both to show use of the word and to show racial bias, but
I
that's
understand-
not
I understood that
necessarily a
the first time.
withdrawal of all 41 uses of the word.
All right, let's start with 17. Let's resume with 17.
Your Honor, the present format that we have on the tape is a 20-second delay between each excerpt.
That will give you the opportunity to say, this is excerpt 17.
All right, and we intend to shorten that for actual presentation to the jury so that we don't have 20-second delays between each excerpt. Are we ready to proceed? This is excerpt B17.
Do we have audio?
We should.
They just go to work and practice movements. Niggers. They're easy. And just practice my kicks.
Now excerpt B18.
That's a good point.
Physically capable? Wrestle 6'7" niggers.
That's a really good point. You have to bring that in.
Excerpts 19 and 20, what we've done is number each use of the word. So this is one excerpt with two uses of the word.
You know why we stopped the choke?
Tell me, please.
We stopped the choke because a bunch of niggers have a bunch of these organizations in the South End. And because all niggers are choked out and killed 12 in 10 years. Really extraordinary, isn't it? 10?
Next we have excerpts 21 through 24, four uses of the word.
I had to convince you so that I was kind of like,
All niggers. Nigger training officers. Niggers 3+1 put 3 years on the job. Think of that. 3+1. I came on this job 10 years ago. 3+1. You were something.
Mr. Uelmen, hold on, Mr. Harris. Is that one of the enhanced versions?
Yes, I believe it is, Your Honor.
Okay.
To reduce the background noise.
Thank you. All right, 25.
Number 25.
So he grew up in the street. He grew up in the school, all black. Every time they take a look at him, he just jumped on him because he figured they're going to jump on him. So they might as well start the fight right now and get it over with.
I believe that too is an enhanced tape, Your Honor. Number 26. Proceeding to 27, Your Honor, the record should reflect that this is the interview in which Lori Diaz is present, and these comments are also directed to her.
They don't do anything. They don't go out and initiate a contact with some 6'5" nigga that's been in prison for 7 years pumping away.
And number 28 is likewise in the presence of Ms. Diaz.
How many people you killed there?
Give me the opportunity.
I didn't ask you that.
I haven't,
You don't even know
because
what
you
it's
haven't
like.
given me the opportunity yet.
You're talking shit. You're talking shit. You sound like a nigger. You're talking shit. You know, and until you've done something, you can't talk about it.
Number 29.
They had a bunch of midgets up there. 2 guys who are like 5'6". They got punched right in the face.
Number 30.
There's going to be a massacre in the future, we know that. There's rolling 60s. Nigger ones. They went into a sporting store, stole 50 Uzis, 3,000 rounds.
Number 31.
You don't need that. It just slows you down. Niggers, I mean, they run like rabbits, you know. You better just concentrate their run. Some places they just sit there and they just look. You have to tell them what to do. What's that?
Sorry. Can you add a comment about that one?
You could roll that back. I believe my name was listed incorrectly on that,
All right.
just
The
as an addendum.
tape,
This is number 31.
number 31.
Mr.
Could you re-roll
Mr.
that?
Harris, would you run that back for us, please?
Thank you.
You have to tell them what to do.
Yes.
At the beginning, the record should reflect the speaker is identified as McKinny incorrectly. Is that?
That's correct.
Is that Officer Furman speaking?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Concentrate their run. Some places they just sit there and they just look. You have to tell them what to do. What's that?
Number 32.
A female responding to a call said, what if I just been raped by $2? And some female shows up, what's she going to do?
Your Honor, numbers 33 through 37, we do not have audio. These are all taken from tape number 9, which was inadvertently taped over. This is number 33. Should I put the words on the record, Your Honor?
No, they're in the offer of proof, as I recollect, aren't they, counsel?
Yes.
All right, so as long as you refer in the record to which offer this is, which is, that we're on 33 now, correct?
Yes.
All right.
take it it's unnecessary to elicit from Ms. McKinney her recollection of each of these.
I think since there's no tape, I think you do need to establish some foundation regarding when the transcript was done, accuracy, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. Referring to what was just displayed as excerpt number 33, Ms. McKinney, do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
I need to read it again or look at the proffer, please.
I'm sorry?
I need to read it again or look at the proffer, please.
All right. Can you look at the offer of proof, number 33?
I would ask that the witness look at the monitor, Jerry Crawford puts it in context.
That's true.
All right.
Right.
Could
Right.
we display 33 again, please? Do you recall that statement?
I don't have an independent recollection of that statement, no.
All right. Now, if you could refer to your transcript number 9 at page 1. I believe it's in the front of the collection of transcripts that you have there.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. Overruled.
Please. Referring to your transcript number 9 at page 1, do you have that?
Yes, I do.
Now, do those words appear in the transcript? Now it's funny because guys in internal affairs.
That's correct. As soon as she finishes reading.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Do you recall these words being spoken by Officer Furman?
In the context of this, yes.
And in what context was that?
We were talking about a particular investigation, autopsy investigation of IA, Internal Affairs, related to an incident in the story.
And when and where did this conversation take place?
It took place in 1987,
Do you recall
approximately the summer of '87.
the date in 1987?
I don't recall the exact date. It would have probably been in the summer, or spring, or early summer.
Did you indicate a date on the transcript itself?
May I refer back to the transcript? I believe I did.
If that would refresh your recollection.
Overruled. Go ahead.
The date on the transcript is
No, just read it to see if that refreshes your recollection as to when it was.
Does that,
I only recall that it was sometime in '87 in the spring or early summer. So yes, that refreshes
in
my
the spring
recollection.
or early summer of
Yes.
1987? And was that also in Los Angeles?
Yes.
And that would be true with respect to offers 34, 35, 36, and 37, Your Honor, that come from the same transcript. Do you actually recall word for word the words that that Officer Furman spoke on that occasion?
No.
Is the transcript an accurate record of what Officer Furman said at that time?
The transcript would be an accurate record of what Officer Furman said.
And did you make that transcript soon after the conversation took place?
Yes,
How soon?
within a day or two.
And you didn't change or in any way alter the words that you heard on the tape in preparing the transcript?
Sustained. Rephrase the question.
Did you put into the transcript the words that you actually heard Officer Furman speaking on the tape?
Yes, I transcribed the words I actually heard Officer Furman speak.
All right, thank you. Could we proceed to excerpt 34? Do you recall Officer Furman speaking those words?
Yes,
And was that also in the spring or early summer of 1987,
yes,
in the same conversation as the previous excerpt?
yes,
And does the transcript accurately reflect the words that Officer Furman spoke?
yes.
We could proceed to number 35. You recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes,
When and where were they spoken?
that would be in the same interview in 1987.
And does the transcript accurately reflect the words that Officer Furman spoke on that occasion?
Yes,
Number 36. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
no, I have no independent recollection of those words.
All right. Um, Could you look at transcript number 9 at page 11?
Or just read it to yourself and see if that refreshes your recollection as to what was there.
I'm sorry, I haven't found it on page 9.
No, page 11.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
That refreshes your recollection?
yes.
Do you recall the context in which these words were spoken?
In terms of accountability for police officer actions,
And these words were spoken in the course of the same interview in the spring or early summer of 1987?
yes,
And the transcript accurately records what Officer Furman said?
yes.
All right, number 37. Do you recall those words being spoken by Officer Furman?
No, I have no independent recollection of those words.
All right, could you look at the transcript for number 9 at page 12?
Foundation.
Oh,
Yes,
That refresh your recollection?
yes.
Do you recall the context in which those words were spoken?
We were talking about the problems between different racial groups in LAPD, specifically Hispanics, Mexicans, and blacks.
And these words were spoken in the course of the same conversation in the spring or early summer of 1987?
Yes,
And does that transcript accurately record the words of Officer Furman?
yes.
Now, the next three excerpts, 38 and 39 and 40, well, specifically 38 and 40, make some reference to the 77th precinct. Did that have some particular relevance in the context of your conversations with Officer Furman?
Yes,
just so the record's straight, we don't have precincts in Los Angeles.
Division. Division?
Yep.
Could you explain what the 77th Division, what significance that had?
I had ridden along with some officers in the 77th, and I was modeling this particular division after the 77th.
For the screenplay?
For the screenplay, yes.
And where is the 77th located?
I forget the exact street location. I'm sorry.
Is that in South Central Los Angeles?
Yes. I just forget the exact location.
All right. Could we have excerpt number 38, please?
Goes, why don't you give him a 77 flight detector test? You know, and just everybody, a bunch of guys will laugh, old timers, you know. Then Mike will ask his partner, what's that? So we keep choking off till they tell you the truth. You know, it's kind of funny, but a lot of those movie things. Anyway, so you're in the shadows like that. Now when you're talking to somebody, it's not like you're really listening to their words, because you'll key on what's the truth and what isn't. First thing, anything out of a nigger's mouth for the first 5 or 6 sentences is a fucking lie. That's just right out. There's got to be a reason why he's going to tell you the truth. He's just not going to go, right.
Excerpt number 39.
got tired, we basically got impatient with him being so fucking stupid, which I thought he was. So, just handcuffed him and went scenic route to the station. We searched him again, found the gun. Went over to the baseball bat and talked a lot. And when I left, Dana goes, "No blood mark." "No problem. Not even any marks, Dana. Just body shards." You ever try to find a bruise on a nigger? Pretty tough, huh?
Number 40.
Oh, yeah.
Leave that old station, man. It's got the smell of niggers that have been beaten and killed in there for years.
They're big on instruction.
Do you recall the context of that excerpt, Ms. McKinney?
It would be
Discussion
helpful
about the new
to see
building
it.
for 77s.
Do you
It would
recall
be
that?
helpful to see it. It would only be in discussing the 77th and perhaps after a ride-along that I had done.
Offer number 41, Your Honor, is not on the tape yet. It was added in our supplement to the defense amended offer of proof after it was located on a transcript of tape number 10. So if I could read it into the record.
It's actually at page 2 of your supplement, correct?
Yes. Quote, came up with a new name for niggers, anthrocide, ANTHROCIDE, dark gray color on Porsches. Now nobody's going to mind being called a anthracide, do you think? Do you recall Officer Furman speaking those words?
Yes?
And do you recall when and where that comment was made?
No.
Is that a misspelling?
It was just done phonetically, Your Honor, so it may well be. If you could refer to the transcript of tape number 10 on page 16, please.
What's the purpose of this at this point?
Of 41?
Yes.
Well, it's the most recent of all of the offers.
All right. What's the
This one
date
is
on this?
1988.
All right. Yes. Yes.
I'm-
Refresh your recollection?
I'm unable to find it.
It's not very coherently put together.
I think we may have the wrong transcript.
I'm looking
Because-
at tape number 10, page 16.
I think we're looking at
I
transcript.
understand the problem. What you have there is the transcript of tape number 10. But what we want to refer to is your transcript
Number 10.
number 10.
Why don't you show it to her, Counsel? Do you have it in the book?
You're right.
Of that transcript, page 16.
Thank you. Yes,
Just the half-page
yes,
transcript?
I remember it from my transcript, not,
All right, I'm sorry, Counsel, which
let me take that back.
page?
Page number 16
16.
of the McKinney transcript, number 10.
Got it. Thank you.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes,
That appears under the name Farrell. Is that correct?
yes, it does.
Does that have some association for you in terms of how this occurred? Or?
I believe there was an Officer Farrell with whom Officer Furman had worked at one time, and this is a portion of the tape in which there were categories, and then transcribed.
And,
The transcriptions are Officer Furman's words, but the categories are regarding my questions or the areas of conversation.
and is the transcription an accurate record of words that were spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes,
And do you recall approximately when this conversation took place?
to my best recollection, I believe it was 1988. This particular example doesn't help me know that. There's something else on that tape that helps me know that it was 1988.
All right, so in looking at that transcript, there were other portions that reminded you of the time that the conversation took place?
Yes,
What was that?
there's one reference to being a good father, or on being a father, and at the time I was either pregnant with my second child, my second son, or had just given birth. So I remember that reference particularly sticking. And then I think there's another reference to 1988 being the year of the gangs, and the next year being something else. I don't recall it verbatim.
All right, so that, in context, was a conversation that you recall taking place in 1988.
Yes, I also remember this particular item because I didn't get it.
You didn't get it?
I didn't understand. It was a joke that I didn't
Now,
get.
this was a conversation that was taped over, is that correct? Where the tape was reused?
I don't know.
You haven't been able to locate the actual tape of this conversation.
That's correct.
But the transcript that you prepared, was that done shortly after the conversation took place?
Yes,
And is that an accurate record of what Officer Furman said?
yes.
We can now move on, Your Honor, to the C category, the police misconduct excerpts. And the first eight of these, the first 8 of these are all drawn from the first transcribed
second. Right.
conversation. So if we could roll number 1 and then And we could proceed directly to number 2. Now, this excerpt indicates in parenthetical, in response to a question, have you done that before? Nods. Do you recall these words being spoken by Officer Furman?
Yes.
And did you indicate in your transcription the reference to nods?
Yes.
And could you explain what you meant by that?
That Officer Furman nodded in the affirmative.
All right. So he was nodding his head up and down
Yes.
in an affirmative way,
Yes.
as though he were saying, yes, I have done that before.
Correct.
Thank you. Excerpt number 3. Excerpt number 4. We could just stop that for a moment. Referring back to the list of questions that you gave to Detective Furman after this interview took place,
Yes.
do you still have that in front of you?
Yes.
If you could look at question number 16 of the follow-up questions you had posed for round 2 of your interviews.
Yes.
Question number 16 is, how do you hire someone who is capable of shooting someone in the back, number 1? And number 2, on what grounds would you determine who is capable of figuring out who the bad guys are? Refer to page 25 of the transcript. Were you referring, Detective Furman, specifically to this excerpt in posing that question?
Yes.
Thank you. If we could proceed to excerpt number 5.